our alumni panel on healthcare occupations outside of the United States. So we've got a wide range of backgrounds and experiences here, so it should be a super interesting morning. We are recording this session. If at any point you don't want to show up on the recording, you can just turn your mic and camera off, and then you won't show up on the recording at all. Students, if you have any questions at any point, you can type your questions into the chat. If you're not sure how to ask a question or you want to ask it anonymously, you can just directly chat it to me and I'll ask it anonymously for you, or I can help you kind of formulate it as well. We do have a couple other people from Career Exploration on the call, so you can always chat it to them as well. But Stuart and Amanda are on with us today, so they'll be helping out with things. We're going to drop the panelist bios in the chat. Hopefully you reviewed them before this, but just in case you didn't get a chance to, Stuart's going to drop those in the chat so you can take a look and see what questions you might want to ask of our panelists. But let's get started. So I'm going to have each of the panelists give a quick intro, and I'll just go in the order that you appear on my screen. So Camilla, if you'd like to start us off, that'd be great.
Let's start by unmuting. So hi everyone, I'm Camilla. I'm currently working as a postdoctoral fellow at the Karolinska Institute, and I study the immune system and its role in cancer. And before I came to Karolinska, I did my PhD in immunology at Harvard in Boston, and before that I studied biology at Macalester. So I think I'm covering the academic slice of the pie today. So if you have any research academic questions, that would be for what I can answer to.
Thank you. Nikki, you're showing up next for me if you'd like to go.
Hi everyone, I'm Nikki. I'm MAC class of 08. I was a chemistry and anthropology major back then, many years ago. After that, I came to Singapore for medical school, and I've just qualified as a public health specialist. So I work as a public health doctor here in Singapore in many different jobs, sometimes clinical, sometimes policy and health management related. So I could answer any questions about med school, public health, global health. Thanks.
Excellent. Assad?
Hi, everyone. I'm Asad. I graduated from Macalester in 2015. I studied biology, English, and did the concentration in community and global health. Since then, I'm kind of a public health practitioner, so I have worked on various projects in Pakistan, which was where I'm from, in the UAE, in Vietnam, and currently I'm living in London, where I am one of the senior epidemiologists working on the COVID-19 response as part of Public Health England. So I'm working on the national response. So yeah, I can do everything that Camilla cannot. I have nothing about academia. I cannot answer questions about that, but I can do the practitioner bits.
All right, and David, I'll give you a second.
Hi, so I'm David Krastek. I was class of 2007 from Macalester, graduated with major in biology, did a minor in American Studies. I went to medical school in England, in Norwich, just a couple hours outside of London. And I'm currently working as an orthopedic surgeon towards becoming like an attending or consultant, as they call them here. So I did a little bit of academics, but not nearly as much as some of these other guys. But I can tell you a little bit about that. So thanks.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for sharing that little bit about yourselves and your backgrounds. I'm going to kick it off with the first question, but students feel free to type questions in the chat as we go, and then we'll get to as many as we can throughout the session. So I would love to hear a little bit about how you all feel a liberal arts degree, specifically one from Macalester, has helped you in your career working internationally and working in healthcare. If you could speak to that. And whoever wants to jump in, go ahead.
I can go first, I guess. I think I have a pretty unique healthcare career. I'm a medical doctor, but I'm also a public health specialist. So I have to be very broad-based. So I have to have a depth of clinical knowledge, but at the same time, I have to know a little bit about everything, because in community health, public health, you're interacting with different sectors of society. So you're not just interacting with scientists and doctors, but also patient organizations, community groups, community leaders, politicians, economists. So you really have to have a well-rounded knowledge base, which I think most clinical specialties, you wouldn't always get to develop that. So it was really useful for me to have that MEC background in my current work.
Yeah, I'll also add that as a researcher, I think it's been amazing to have the background in liberal arts in terms of the time that you have spent practicing writing and communicating your work to other people. So as you are well aware of, this is a year when scientists have to be very good at communicating their work to the public. And I think having a liberal arts background is immensely helpful here. And it's not, so working in Europe, this is not something that's common here. Like you don't, usually when you start a science degree, you start already after high school and you only do science. So there's very little time spent on communication. And I think that gives quite an edge in terms of writing and speaking in front of crowds. And the other thing I would also add is that it's not very common to also have this view of the world that's a bit wider. Like if you're working in science, sometimes it's very, I don't want to say dry, but you can have a very narrow view of what the world is like. And then having that liberal arts background, thinking about different cultural backgrounds or different ways to view things, I think has really helped me look at science with a more critical eye and take different perspectives into consideration. And also think about, okay, how did this knowledge come about? Or what's this treatment group? Is it really representative? And think about that in a more critical way.
Yeah, just echoing what everybody else said, I think one of the things is that even those of us who never left Olin Rice, really, we still saw some of the structural, the way Macalester teaches you to think, which is about structures and how has this happened and how has that happened and why. That's still percolated over to us in our labs. And I think that really, as an epidemiologist, the whole question is, why are these people being affected differently from these other people? And that really helps, and that structural view of it really helps me understand and communicate, as Camilla said, the writing and the speaking, and especially in Europe, yeah, we don't really have that much of a concept of well-roundedness, I think, and so that we definitely, liberal arts students definitely have an edge. I definitely don't think I would be here without that background.
All right. I'm going to move to some of the questions in the chat that I'm getting. Thank you, students, for submitting those. So I'm going to combine a couple here. What was your major motivation, or kind of why did you decide to study medicine outside of the US or continue your education outside of the US? If any of you would like to speak to that.
So I had a few different reasons for wanting to study in the UK. I have a British passport. My dad is English, but I was born and raised in the States. But I have family over here. But when it came to a few things, one was medical schools are less expensive over here than they are in the States. A little bit longer over here. But you also don't need to do a 4-year degree first. So I've taken the longest route possible. School over here is slightly less expensive, even for international students. But also the healthcare system over here, I prefer. And when you don't have to think about patients' insurance and whether or not they can afford it, that's the kind of environment I wanted to practice medicine in. And also my wife is English. We weren't married at the time. So there's a few reasons, and altogether just kind of clinched it. And that's why I studied and now work over here. Yeah.
I could go next, I guess. Oh, Asad first.
Okay, sure. It was less, I mean, it was a logistical decision because I had applied to both the US and the UK for my master's, and I got into a really good one here in England, and I'm also a British citizen, and then so job prospects here would have been easier. I wouldn't have to deal with the whole H-1B visa issue, and again, shorter and cheaper. And I'd gone to my master's about 2.5 years after graduating. So I was keen to get back into the workforce as soon as possible rather than elongate my time as a student.
For me, I'm not American. I'm Zimbabwean. So of course, going to school in America was going to be really expensive since I don't qualify for federal loans. And at that time, Zimbabwe still is a kind of a huge mess. So I was sort of like, where should I go? I have no stable home country. So just by chance, I actually applied to Duke Medical School in North Carolina, and they had just opened a new campus in Singapore. So they were sort of introducing that American four-year graduate medical school there. And I think it was the second class that they were enrolling ever. So it was a new school, so it just seemed like a big adventure. They gave me a full tuition scholarship. So I was like, free medical school and Duke, like it was Singapore, it just sounded really perfect. So I took my Zimbabwean passport and went to Singapore, yeah.
I guess I took a slightly longer route back to Europe. So I left Sweden for Macalester when I was 19, and then stayed for Macalester, obviously, and then also grad school, which took a little time. And the reason why I did my PhD in the US was partly because I didn't want to do a master, because in Europe you had to pay for the master, and then in the US you kind of do the master inside the PhD. And so that was part of the reason, but also I had personal reasons to stay in the US. Let's say my partner was also in the US. So then after I finished my PhD, we were both kind of ready for a change. So my partner is from Angola, and we actually met up at Macalester also. And he was willing to try moving to Europe, and let's see what that would take us, and was able to find a job here too. Actually, it was easier, I think, for him to find a job than for me, being a programmer. But partly it was I had been away from my family for maybe 12, 13 years. And I thought I could do just as well in a lab here, and maybe start a lab, and thinking about starting a family and these kind of things. And I would say it was a bit easier to imagine having a family while doing a postdoc in Sweden than in the US at the time. And so we now have a little son. So that has started. So I'm actually just now starting back to work after maternity leave tomorrow. So.
We appreciate you joining us on your last day of maternity leave. I would love to hear the favorite part of your work, and then probably the biggest challenge of your work right now. And I know that can be hard to narrow down to one thing, but yeah, I'd love to hear your favorite thing and then the most challenging part.
Well, I am at work, so I have to be careful about what I say. Working on a national response for something like COVID is something that, I mean, even though it's a horrible thing to be happening. It is an epidemiologist's dream, to be honest, because the kind of experience you get. So everything about it, it's manic. It's very fast paced. There's a lot going on. You can't be bored at this job, and I think just public health in general, you can't be bored. So that's the most interesting thing and the best thing. The challenge is everything is changing very quickly, very rapidly, and if you are not adaptable, if you yeah, if you're not adaptable or rigid, it can be really difficult. But I think again, Macalester kind of trains you to that sort of adaptability. So I mean, it's a challenge, but it's a good challenge.
I would say my favorite part about my job is well, two things. So first is the kind of thrill of discovery. So you get to do something or figure out something that nobody hopefully has figured out before, and kind of add a piece to the puzzle of how knowledge is made. So I think that's really, really thrilling, even if the piece is very, very tiny sometimes and takes a long time to get there. And second favorite thing is that I get to work with a lot of really clever and fun people. I think the people who are in these fields are usually very curious and excited about things. So I'm very happy to see the people that I see every day at work and to be able to work with them. And I think that was one of the biggest draws for me in thinking about what kind of career I wanted or what I wanted to do, is like think about the people that you'll be spending time with every day. You know, who are these people that you will be meeting and talking to and trying to push yourself along with. And the challenging thing, I think, research is extremely slow sometimes. It's a lot of work and you might end up with absolutely nothing in the end. And so you have to kind of separate your failures from your sense of self. So, or not failures, but sort of dead ends. And they will just come. And I think that's a difficult transition from the bachelor stage towards going into a PhD, was kind of separating what happens in the lab towards feeling how you're feeling about yourself, because those two are not always connected. So you can work really hard and it can go terribly.
For me, I guess right now, the project I'm working on is really working with patient groups. So I really love, why I became a doctor is because I really love that interaction with patients and their families, that really intimate connection that you have in medicine. I couldn't find it anywhere else. So although I'm a public health doctor now, I always loved the opportunity to reconnect with patient groups. So I'm working to develop sort of the advocacy culture here in Asia Pacific. I think if you live in the US or Europe, the patient groups have a platform and voice to really voice out their concerns, to the government, to the FDA. We don't really have that here in Asia. So it's really exciting to help set that up, help influence that. But at the same time, it's very slow work. Everything in policy is slow, convincing everyone to, that is a good idea, taking the small steps. And of course, a challenging thing this year was COVID. So I was actually pulled back to the hospital. I haven't worked in a hospital in a long time. I was working in ICU and accident and emergency. Maybe it's been 5 years since I've worked in an actual hospital ward. So that was really stressful. And we had a huge outbreak here in the foreign worker dormitories. So we have construction workers, migrant workers from around Asia who come and work in the construction industry in Singapore. So we had a massive COVID outbreak in these very concentrated facilities. So it was just a very roller coaster ride because they had to be basically quarantined. We had to quarantine 20,000 people, manage their medical care, and it was really a lot. So I'm happy that now our outbreak is under control. So we're slowly, these men are allowed to go out now and can reintegrate with society, because we didn't really have a lockdown everywhere else, but they were really on lockdown. So it was a challenging situation.
I'd say for me, there's probably three things that I enjoy about my job, or three big things that I mostly enjoy about my job. The first would be making a difference in people's quality of life. In orthopedics, lots of the operations we do are either for trauma, so broken bones, or we do lots of joint replacements for arthritis, and that causes people lots of pain. So if you can help them from that point of view, then that's very rewarding. But also the operating itself is fun. It's a day of operating is almost like a day of playing with toys. I mean, you wouldn't say that to the patients, but it is. There's something challenging and rewarding about working with your hands and knowing that it's that hopefully it'll be making a difference in their lives as well. And the third thing I'd say is the camaraderie. So working with people kind of side by side, whether it's the nurses or HCAs or other doctors and in different departments, just trying to get through the challenges of treating patients together and trying to get a good result together. So those are probably the three big things that I enjoy about my job. Yeah.
Great, thank you all. We've got a couple more student questions in the chat, and some of them are a little bit similar, so I'll read them kind of together. So what's something you enjoy about working outside of the US that the US maybe lacks, or how is the kind of culture different in medicine outside of the US versus working in medicine inside of the US? If any and all portions of that question, whatever pieces you want to answer there.
Is that specific for medicine? The question.
I think just in general, working outside of the US versus working in the US, what appeals to you about that piece?
Well, we get more vacation days for sure. I haven't actually worked in the US, so my entire professional career has been outside, so I can't really make that comparison other than the vacation days, which my friends are suffering.
I guess I can speak to academia is quite similar, I would say, because both in the US and in Stockholm, it's very international. So I feel like I'm kind of in a micro EU here. Like we have, a Swede and then a Spanish person, an Italian person. We're a little bit from all over. And it was similar in where I was in Boston. So in one sense, it's very, very similar. English is still the main language that we talk to each other at work, which I really enjoy because then I can kind of keep that up. But there are a few things that are a little bit different, I would say, like the vacation days for sure. People are are more okay with people taking, several weeks during the summer. It's understood that you won't receive a very quick reply in July. It just won't happen, which can be extremely frustrating sometimes when you're used to kind of the pace in Boston. But for my brain, it was quite nice after 7 years of sort of nonstop Boston academia. But then you can set the pace however you want it, right? So you can still work as efficiently as you want within that. And it's definitely more family friendly where I am now. In terms of, how much paternity leave or parental leave you get. So we get about a year combined, the dad and me, or the partner and me. And so that's a huge difference. And otherwise, I guess the hierarchy is a little bit more plainer in Sweden, like a little bit less. But I think that's very different within Europe. So I think Germany, for example, would be more hierarchical than the US maybe. So I think I can only speak to Sweden here.
I guess I can speak from a health policy perspective. I think Singapore is very unique, the way our political system is here. So policy moves very quickly. So I could be involved in writing a policy this year, and I actually get to implement the policy I helped to write. I get to evaluate the policy. I think in other countries, in the US, health policy moves very slowly. So you can write a lot of academic papers, but the actual change in policy, I don't think the health policy changes that much that quickly at this pace that it can in a small country like Singapore. Yeah. So you get to really learn about policy and writing policies and implementing, seeing a policy from end to end. Yeah.
Great. Anyone else want to jump in on that one, David? Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't work as a doctor in the States either, but my mom is a nurse and my uncle's a doctor over there, and I've friends from Mac who are now doctors, and you do get a lot more holiday time over here, and I think in general it's a bit more compassionate towards the home part of the work-life balance or the work-home balance. You don't make as much money, especially when you compare orthopedics here to orthopedics there. But at the same time, I don't mind because you make plenty to be comfortable on over here. And your hours are less. And like I said, the amount of holiday time you get is more. And you're also a little bit more, I mean, for me, I have family back home, but I also have friends and family in other parts of the world. And living in England is a little bit more central to be able to get to all those places. And as I said before, I prefer practicing in a system where I don't need to worry about whether or not the patients can afford it. It has its cons. It's not a perfect healthcare system by any stretch. But so you'll have pros and cons wherever you go, I think.
Great, thank you. I would love to know, as we wait for more student questions to come in, I'd love to know what advice you have for students who have an interest in this field, or if there's something that you wish you would have known when you were at Macalester, just kind of starting off in this field. What do you wish you could have told yourself back then? What do you wish you would have known?
I think I tell this in any time on one of these panels, but it's to take, I wish I had taken a programming class. And I wish that, because biology is becoming increasingly data heavy, and maybe all of you are already doing that, so I don't even need to say that. And maybe to be a medical doctor, you wouldn't need that, but to be a researcher in biology, I think it's super helpful to you to do some programming, to do some computer science, statistics. And I did some statistics, I did the required courses, but I think, and I did linear algebra, but that hasn't helped me much. But the programming would have helped me a lot. So now I'm like, ooh, when do I have time to do that? But the other advice, if you're seriously considering academia outside the US, then think about things like, okay, do I want to do a master before I start my PhD? Because oftentimes the PhDs programs in Europe, for example, I don't know about the other places, but oftentimes they require a master before, and not always, but that means another 2 years that you maybe would have to pay, and that's a consideration. Or would you want to do a PhD in the US and then transition to another place after that? And bearing in mind that people don't know as much about liberal arts outside the US, so you may have to translate your degree a little bit. So if you leave after the PhD or after the master, you may have an easier time transitioning, but that doesn't mean it's not possible, right? And the other thing is to really reach out to people and network, and that's a very easy thing to say, right? Just go network, but it's quite hard actually to just do right now also. But write an email or try to get a hold of a Macalester alumni who are super willing to talk to you and to introduce you to people, because it's hard to know, what's a good place. It's easier when you're in the place to know, like I would know most of the good labs in Boston, and I could say, okay, this is a good place to go, or like they're nice there, or this is really good research. But I didn't know as many in Sweden where I was going. So really, really helpful to talk to people and to go to international conferences and try to meet the people from the places where you want to go, and so that you know who's a good person to work with.
Yeah, I echo the second part of that for sure. It is what you bring to the table, but also who you know. but not in like a nepotism way, but it is the soft contacts that really help you get your career off the ground. And so yeah, I sound like a broken record when I say network, but it doesn't have to be like a shake hands, this is my elevator pitch. It's just say, what do you do? What is your work? What are you interested in? And that starts very meaningful conversations that can really, you never know what somebody can do for you when you have those conversations. So that's one thing. I mean, when I left Macalester 5 years ago, did I plan that I would be here? I mean, no, nobody did. Also, my job is COVID, so I couldn't plan for that a year ago either. But all of it has been, I talked to somebody and they gave me an idea or something or the other, and it just snowballed out of there. And I'm very happy that things have worked out the way they have. The second thing is, if you're not into academia, one of the best pieces of advice an alumni gave to me when I was on the receiving end of a panel like this was to maybe take a few years out of academia and figure out what you like and what you don't like, and learning what you don't like is as important as learning what you do like, because that definitely helps you get a focus and a direction. Because I mean, at the end of the day, grad school is expensive, and it shouldn't be something that you're doing because you're comfortable in academia. And I mean, again, if you want to go into academia, that's a different thing. But because most people at the end of their bachelor's have not known anything other than academia, so it can be a logical and comfortable step to take. But I think it's good to step away from that comfort zone if you aren't completely sure that academia is for you.
And also for academia, it's super helpful with time off. I think you can tell, like, the incoming PhD students who have had a little time to work in a lab or to think about things. It's a change of perspective. And I think there's this feeling of urgency, I think, when you're in your senior year to kind of figure your whole life out. And I really had nothing figured out. And not that I have anything figured out now either, but it went okay. You kind of pick the thing right in front of you and find something you enjoy to do, that it doesn't have to be so deterministic. I think I thought I would have this lightning bolt and it was like, oh, you're going to be this, but I never got that, so you can just kind of find the thing that you like and keep doing that. And that's totally good.
Yeah, and I'd say to add on to that, things might not always go the way you planned. Like you said, you couldn't plan for COVID a year ago. But even more than that, I knew I wanted to go to medical school. But when I graduated Mac, I started working at the inventory department for HCMC, the hospital in Minneapolis. I was just unpacking boxes. But you continue working towards your goal, and whether it's med school or grad school in an academic area, it might be tough. It's probably going to be tough to get into. But I think Mac gives you a good background in trying to stay focused on your goals, and also using, like Saad said, soft contacts to try to get experience and try to get the edge on your competition to get into school or wherever it is that you're trying to get into, or job, or whatever it is. So yeah.
I would just add to that. I think what everyone said, I'll re-emphasize that as well. And I think stay hopeful. I graduated in 2008, which was another like devil year. So I know how some of you are feeling, approaching graduation, or into a really bad economy, or but don't let that bring you down, or things will work themselves out. They always do. So don't worry that oh, we're graduating into a cursed year or cursed economy. It'll work out. And I would also agree with the notion of taking some time off. So it's not always possible. Sometimes, if you have visa issues, you may not be able to really be as free to just kind of, chill in different places. But you can structure it in a way that it's a professional break, I guess. So you can take like a research year, you can go do a master's, even let's say in medical school, you can go and do another degree in the middle of medical school. So I actually went to Oxford in the middle of medical school after my second year. So I spent a year in England and in Kenya. So it wasn't really a break. It was sort of an overachiever's break because I was studying at Oxford, but it was kind of a change of scene, from medical school grind, writing boards. It's quite stressful. So if you don't have the flexibility, to really take a break, like for monetary reasons, for visa reasons, try and structure a professional break somewhere in there. It'll really revitalize you, yeah.
Thank you all. Great advice. So we've got a couple more student questions in the chat. How would you say your degrees are maybe flexible for moving around the world? Or another way to think of that is, would you say your degree specifically allows you to relocate if you wanted to move somewhere else, or is it really more specific to where you are in the world?
I think mine is super flexible. You can go anywhere. So with that, you just need a research institute and someone who wants to do research with you with the type of background that you have, and then you can basically go anywhere you want.
So I have a MBBS, which is what they call it over here. And it's fairly flexible. I think you can go and practice in most countries across the world. To go back to the States, I have to do step 1 and step 2. And even then it might be a bit tricky because you need to know people or have done an internship, in which case it's also knowing people. And I think other countries, like I think Hong Kong would be difficult for me to go to. But for the most part, it's especially once you get up to attending or consultant levels, sort of the top level, it's fairly easy to go just about anywhere in the world with.
So I think I'm going to approach this in 2 ways. My Macalester degree, I'm not convinced how relocatable without my British passport I would have been, because visas and competition and getting a job in the EU means that the employer has to prove that they can't find anybody in the 28 countries who qualifies for that job. So I think that, but then my master's degree is in epidemiology, which I think does transfer a little bit more. Yeah, you just need a crisis and then you become a hot commodity. So I think the degree itself isn't always the only factor when it comes to being able to relocate.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same what David said. My situation was a bit unique because I was going specifically to an American school in Singapore. So let's say if I wanted to go to the US, it would be a little easier because I've already taken boards. But it's not so easy as David said. You still have to compete with American graduates who are competing for the same residency as you. So it's not easy, but because I went to an American school, technically I could apply for a residency in the US. But because I had a scholarship from Singapore, I was sort of on a obligation to work for the Singapore government for 5 years after I graduated school. So the trade-off for free school was you have to work here for a bit. So I guess now I'm free, I could go, but it would be tough competition because you're competing against Americans, competing against Canadians. So I would have to really get amazing recommendations or something.
And maybe I can add something, not to speak to for medical professionals, but I know quite a few people who have moved around in the EU and who have done their medical degree outside of Sweden and is now working in Sweden. For example, a Macalester student did his medical degree in Ireland, and then move to Sweden. And that's perfectly feasible to move within the EU once you have your medical degree. So that may be something interesting to think about. So if you would get your medical degree in Sweden, you could go then somewhere else in Europe. The only caveat, which could be a big or small caveat depending on you, is the language, right? Because in some places like the UK, you would obviously be fine doing everything in English. But in most places you do medical school in the language of the actual country, right? So a plus side, you might learn a language, but it might be challenging to move between the different places if you haven't already studied those languages. But just to throw that out there.
That's a great point. Thank you. So another student question. I'm going to make this a little bit more general. How did you all choose the specific area that you specialized in, whether that was in academia or in medicine? How did you figure out what you wanted your focus to be? And maybe you didn't figure it out, maybe you fell into it, but could you talk a little bit about that?
Hi, Tony. I'm really sorry. I have to run, but I'd be happy for anybody to contact me via my email address. If there's any questions, I have to do another Zoom call or whatever. I'm really sorry. I got to go.
That's okay. Thank you, David.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care. Good luck, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. If anyone else wants to jump in with your answers to that last question, please feel free.
I sort of just fell into it, to be honest. I thought I would be studying microbiology or something at Macalester, and then I was working in Devavani Chatterjee's lab, which is kind of how I know Camilla's name, because she used to work there as well before my time. And one day I was like, this is not what I want to do. And I'd already started taking some public health classes through the community and global health concentration, and that kind of, there was the switch, I think, in sophomore year, junior year, when I decided that I'd had enough of a lab and that I wanted to switch. And then I went out and did a bunch of things. I worked in Pakistan on childhood immunization. I worked in the UAE managing grants for university that had public health research funding, and so people were applying for it, and we were looking at what they were doing and monitoring that. And then I also looked at a tuberculosis control program in Vietnam. And while I was doing all these things, as I said, like, I figured out what I liked and what I didn't like. And my decision to go to the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine for epidemiology was mostly because I think I had all the soft skills from Macalester, so writing, reading, communication, the flexibility, but I didn't have the statistical skills, so I built those in. So it kind of is like seeing where you're at, where you want to be, and also what you do shows you more of what you want, what's out there. So yeah, I definitely fell into it.
I guess for me, I was definitely an Olin Rice rat, Keith Kawata forever. And I was also an anthropology major. So public health medicine is really just the perfect combination of those two sides of myself. I get to really express them fully. I love medicine. I love social science. So I get to do both. Yay.
I think for me, it was the opposite reaction to Devavani's lab, I suppose. I was there, actually, I took a biology class with Devavani my first year, and it was her first year teaching as well. And she came at it as what she would call herself, a feminist biologist. And I remember one of her classes, she had like a list of model organisms, and she had Whoopi Goldberg with a t-shirt that said, "This is what a feminist looks like," as her human model organism. And then she talked about the immune system, and I'd always been fascinated by it, but I had really, when I came to Macalester, I was going to be a chemistry major or a math major and a music major, or a double major. That was my plan. And it didn't happen, any of those things. So instead, I fell in love with the immune system and ended up being a teacher's assistant for Devavani, and then also working in her lab and doing the research in immunology course and immunology. And after that, I was kind of all in on the immune system. And for me, it was kind of the definition of who you are. I mean, it's neuroscience tells you who you are in your brain, but the immune system decides on a molecular basis who is you and who is not you all the time. So that's kind of what got me into it. And then it's a very social part of biology. So it's a lot of cells talking to each other and interacting across the body. So that was what I got excited about.
To be fair, I love Devavani's lab as well. It was just not for me.
That's totally good. This is perfect for the panel, right? Showing that one place can mean different things.
Yeah.
Love that. Great. Well, I think we have time for one more student question if anyone wants to type one in the chat. But in the meantime, if the three of you would be willing to share your contact information in the chat, it doesn't have to be your email. You could just say, find me on LinkedIn, whatever you all prefer. That would be really helpful because then students could send any follow-ups or thank yous or however they want to contact you after this. I'll give them a second. Great. So I'm not seeing any other student questions come in. Students, if you think of anything after this, please feel free to follow up with our panelists, including David. I think Stuart put his email in the chat as well. As they said, they want to help, they want to talk to you. Obviously, they're very willing to help. They committed to doing this panel. So, and not just them, there's plenty of MAC alums out there that would be totally willing to connect with you and talk about their experiences and give you advice. So keep that in mind. So let's give them a round of applause. You can use your little reaction guy on Zoom if you want to. But thank you all so much for joining us today. This was really helpful. I think it's great. We got a really diverse group of perspectives and different backgrounds and different industries and fields. So I think this was just really helpful. So we will get the recording up online if anyone wants to go back and watch any portions again. But other than that, I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Also, if people have a minute, we really appreciate feedback. So I'm putting a survey into the chat. This is any student participants who'd be willing to take just a minute to fill out this survey. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Stuart. All right. I will give it a second so students can click on that link. But yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.